I'm Hannah and welcome to the Purple Sector. After 9 rounds, 72 days and many broken wings later, the Formula 3 season has come to a close, with Oscar Piastri being crowned the 2020 Formula 3 Drivers' Champion and his team Prema snatching the team's title. Today, I'm going to be ranking all 35 drivers who took part in the season, whether that's for all 18 races or just for one round, based on how they did and the expectations coming into the season. These are just my personal opinions, so if you don't agree with them, that's okay. But let me know in the comments below who was your biggest surprise of the season and who was your biggest disappointment. So, the 5 tiers are: future F1 material, kinda self-explanatory. Not a bad day at the office for those drivers who did well or outperformed their car. Another season for those drivers who show promise but either need more experience or need to mount a title challenge in 2021. One to forget for those drivers who either had unfortunate luck and the championship standing doesn't reflect their talent, or didn't do too well this year. And lastly, F, for those drivers whose season has been an absolute write-off. So, starting in reverse championship order, we have Andreas Essner, and he's going in one to forget. He appeared at one race weekend at Spa covering for Sophia Flörsch. He finished 27th in race 1 and 20th in race 2. Not brilliant, but outperforming his teammates, one of whom I'm going to go on to next, with Alessio De Leda, who is getting a big fat F from me. I'm sorry, but this season was not good and he repeatedly struggled to keep his car on track. Next up is Leonardo Pulcini. He's going in one to forget. His one appearance in Spain was okay, but he performed a lot better in Formula 3 last year. Next up is Inam Ahmed, and the British driver is going in one to forget. He didn't show much in the Carlin car, was outperformed by his teammate Clement Novalak, and departed from the team after 6 races. Now, onto the gender of Kaylan Williams, and he's going in F. To be honest, this season was not good for the gender motorsport drivers who languished at the back of the pack for most of the season. Then is Federico Malvestiti, who's going in F. Both he and Williams were outscored by their teammate Nannini, and to be honest, he was pretty forgettable all season. Now, onto the Campos of Sophia Flörsch. She's going in one to forget for me. I had such high hopes for her going into the season, but to be honest, she hasn't done that well, with her highest finish being in 12th, despite that Campos car being able to get points on occasions. Another driver who disappointed me this season was David Schumacher, who's going in F. He's the son of former Formula 1 driver Ralf Schumacher, and I think everyone was expecting more of the German driver. And despite a mid-season switch to Carlin Buzz Racing, he still failed to get a point. Then we move on to the first MP Motorsport car of Lucas Dunner, who gets an F from me. Thoroughly outperformed by his teammates Richard Verschoor and Bent Viscal, the driver languished outside the points all season and didn't look close to having the talent of his fellow MP Motorsports drivers. Now we have for me probably the unluckiest driver of the season, Jack Doohan, who's going in one to forget. A member of the Red Bull Junior team, luck was not on his side this season. The Australian driver kept getting caught up in incidents and fell so close to getting a well-deserved points finish at the final race in Mugello, but ended up finishing 11th. Next up is Cameron Dass, and the American driver is going in F. He had no points to his name, was pretty much outperformed by his teammates all season. Now we have our first points finisher so far in Igor Fraga. He's going in another season for me. He achieved one of Charouz's 3 points finishes this season, and has shown promise. I'm just disappointed that Charouz blocked his move to high-tech for the final round in Tuscany, because I think we would have had a better view of his talents on tracks if they'd just let him race. Now on to Fraga's teammate Michael Belov, who drove for rounds 7, 8 and 9 after David Schumacher moved to karting. I'm putting the Russian driver in another season. He recorded his first points finish in only his 3rd race of the season, and to be honest, I think he deserves a full season just to be able to hone his racecraft a bit more. Then we have one of the last-minute stand-ins at Carling, Ben Barnico, who's going in another season. A decent job for the driver, especially considering he's driven in just endurance and GT racing since 2017, and he achieved a point in Inam Ahmed's former car on his 2nd weekend, so not a bad job. The last Charouz driver to talk about is Roman Stanek, who for me deserves another season. Only 1 points finish in 8th at Monza. He did show some promise, but I think he needs to be in a more competitive car for next year. Then we have the 2018 Formula Renault Eurocup champion Max Futrell, who for me, hands down, has to be one of my biggest disappointments this season. I was expecting the Renault Academy driver to be a regular challenger for points, and he just seemed to struggle massively with the high-tech car and left the championship after 6 rounds. Now onto the driver who replaced Max Futrell at high-tech, Pierre-Louis Chauvet, who I think deserves a full season. The Formula Regional European Championship driver was able to take 6th on his 2nd race weekend after starting down 18th and developed his style over a short period of time A successful season in Fresh should see him promoted for 2021. Next we have Matteo Nannini, the 2019 Formula 4 UAE champion, and I'm putting him in another season. The highest placed gender driver managed to score his maiden podium in Spain. However, for most of the season he was languishing towards the back of the pack and would need to improve and achieve more regular points finishes next season. The 2019 Italian Formula 4 champion Dennis Hauger deserves an F for me as another disappointing driver this season. Much was expected of the Red Bull Junior and he failed to deliver, with only 1 point finish and 1 podium in the second race in Hungary. He spent the rest of the season languishing outside the points, and if he wants to keep his backing, he'll need to pull his socks up next year. I'd give the British driver Ollie Caldwell another season. Outperformed by his teammates in the Tridents, he did show glimpses of promise throughout the season. However, he needs to finish much higher up than 16th in the standings if he wants to be promoted to Formula 2 in the future. On to Enzo Fittipaldi. I would put the Ferrari Academy driver in for another season. He had some good results and some very bad luck on occasions, but I think he could be a serious title contender next year. Then we have the first of the ARTs in Sebastian Fernandez, who I would put in one to forget. Overshadowed by his teammates and the only ART driver to fail to score a podium this year. He spent most of the season towards the back of the points finishers or just outside, flew under the radar all season. For me, Bent Viscal deserves another season in Formula 3, after recording his first win at Silverstone. The Dutch driver's had some not so great luck this year, however has shown real potential, which if demonstrated on a more consistent basis, could see him be a title contender in 2021. Next up we have Clement Novalak, the French driver, who actually competes under a British licence. 2 podiums this season were the highlight of his campaign, and he deserves to be in not a bad day at the office. He regularly outperformed his Callan car, and I could see him doing well in the championship next year. Now on to the second ART of Alexander Smolia, who I believe does deserve another season. 8 points finishes with 1 podium were okay for the Russian driver, who did show genuine talent but was massively eclipsed by his teammate. Alex Peroni's 2020 season was not a bad day at the office for the Aussie driver, outperforming his Campos car, finishing 10th in the standings, 19 places ahead of his nearest teammate, and maybe a third season could do the trick. However, I don't see him being promoted to F2 just yet. Up next we have Richard Verschoor. An improved season compared to last year, with more consistent points finishes, earns him another season from me. However, I was expecting him to be a title contender, and I'm on the fence as to whether he'll get promoted to Formula 2 for next year. Moving on, we have Larim Zendelli, who I think could need another season. It was a much better year for the German driver. However, a lack of consistency through the middle part of the campaign really hurt his performance. He needs to rack up some more consistent podium finishes next year, but I definitely think he could be one of the frontrunners for the title. Now on to Jake Hughes, who finished 7th in the championship for the second year in a row. It was not a bad day at the office for the British driver, who drove the wheels off his HWA and left his teammates in the dust. A few unlucky instances meant he wasn't able to push himself further up in the standings, and I think it's a shame because we probably won't get to see him in Formula 2 next year. Next up is David Beckmann, who was the surprise of the season for me, and definitely deserves a promotion to Formula 2 next year after thoroughly being the third man at ART last year. He scored points on all but one occasion, with a retirement that wasn't actually his fault. The German driver showed spectacular consistency, and I would say it's not a bad day in the office for the 20-year-old driver. In 5th place in the standings we have Liam Lawson, who for me is definitely future F1 material. When he was on it, he was on it, such as his final win in the last race of the season at Mugello where he dominated. However, he'll need to make sure he doesn't make some of the similar mistakes he made this year, as it's most likely he's going to get promoted into F2. The Red Bull Junior could be lining up for a future AlphaTauri seat in a couple of years, so keep your eyes peeled. Now on to the first of the Prema drivers with Frederick Vesti, who is going in not a bad day at the office. 4th in the championship will probably see the Danish driver promoted to Formula 2. However, a difficult middle part of the season saw him fall off the pace, and I was expecting him to be more of a championship contender than he was. Overall, I think he'll need to put himself towards the front once again next year if he wants to secure an F1 team's backing. Next up is Logan Sargent, who for me is definitely future F1 material. An unfortunate incident in the final race saw him knocked out of title contention. However, I think he could have snatched the title away from Oscar Piastri. A strong qualifier, the American driver will hopefully get picked up by an F1 academy soon. Maybe Haas, Williams with their new American owners, or even McLaren, who currently have no members of their young driver programme. He's a shoo-in to get promoted to F2 next year, and rightfully so. Teo Bachar has to be one of the standouts of the season, and hands down is future F1 material. The 17-year-old driver took the grid by storm, dominated his teammates, and came second in the championship, which pretty much everyone thought was going to be a Prema 1-2-3. He made some spectacular overtakes this year and left his mark on the series, and he'll definitely be one to watch in the future. Hands down, has to be the driver of the season for me, and I have no doubt he'll be in Formula 2 next year, possibly continuing with ART. And last, but by no means least, we have our championship winner, Oscar Piastri, who has to be future F1 material. This has been an extremely tough Formula 3 season this year, and it says a lot about the RT driver's talents that he was able to snatch the title in the final race of the season. It was a very strong season for the Renault Sport Academy driver, which should see him promoted to Formula 2 next year. Interestingly though, the rookie driver never qualified on the front row in the entire season, showing clearly how well executed his racecraft is. So that's all 35 drivers done and dusted, and hopefully we'll get to see some of them moving up to Formula 2 for 2021. Let me know in the comments below, who are you most surprised by this season and who was your biggest disappointment and why? Please remember to like, subscribe and comment below, and I'll see you soon. Au revoir, bye!